Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogue, and it's a real pleasure to welcome a former Chicagoan who's lived in Israel for a long time, Dr. Dodi Fishman Tobin. Dr. Tobin, who I will apologize in advance, I'm going to refer to you as Dodi because we
Great.
go back a long time.
Yes, we do.
Dodi is a graduate of the Academy. Of course, she has her doctorate, but most importantly, she has been one of the major teachers of Torah among the women in Israel in her various roles. We've actually had the privilege of having her as a scholar in residence at KINS not too long ago, when people actually saw each other in person. So it's great to welcome you, Dodi. Thank you for giving me this time to be able to talk with us a little bit.
It is a pleasure. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So just to get a feel for things now, in Chicago, unfortunately, things are just really bad with Corona. And the Orthodox communities hit a little bit harder this time around, or significantly harder than the last time. But at the other hand, there's a lot of hope because of all the vaccines, but we're still limited. Schools are open and schools are open.
Right.
What's going on in Israel now?
Wow. So Israel, it seems like we're about to enter a third wave. You know, I remember when they were talking about how there's going to be a second and maybe a third wave and how winter is going to be more difficult. And that's what they're talking about now. They've opened things up a little bit and the numbers start going up. And so they're already talking about closing, locking down again, Hanukkah, it'll be another lockdown. That seems to be how it's going here.
Are the schools?
You know, and schools have been opening, and I even heard on the news that they're going to be opening even more next week. Even as they sort of lock down more, they're going to be opening up schools more. But it's, you know, every time something is opened up, it seems that there are, you know, they have to close it down again. So it's quite interesting. We have a shul in our backyard. I'm sure one of many people that have minyanim in their homes, in their backyards. We've been davening in our backyard for several months already.
Well, it's about 25 degrees in Chicago, so it's a little complicated to do that.
Yes.
And I know
Yes.
you must miss Chicago winters.
I do not miss the Chicago winters at all, not at all.
So let's talk Torah a little bit.
Okay.
You've been teaching for many years in many different roles. And women's Torah learning in Israel is different than women's Torah learning in the United States. It seems to be much more accepted, much more an integral part of being part of the Dati Leumi community. Why do you think that is?
It's interesting. I've talked about this with people. I've heard others speak about it. People like Malki Bina, who I've worked for many years. In a funny way, the fact that the different, I guess, sectors of society here, the what do you call it? The migzarim, the English word for that. You know, Haredim, Dati Leumi, right? So because there's, in a way, there's more separation. What goes on within the Dati Leumi is less affected by, or is less concerned with what, let's say, the Haredi thinks of what women are doing or how women are learning within the Dati Leumi community. So I think that's part of it. I think that it just doesn't, you know, the Haredi, which is usually, you know, if they're thinking that women are perhaps a little more progressive in the learning in the Dati Leumi community, if they have issues with that, okay, so they have issues with that, but within the Dati Leumi community itself, we can go ahead and you know, move forward and progress in terms of learning in ways that that we want to. It doesn't. So I think there's a freedom here. And also in terms of numbers, you know, it's a migzar. The Dati Leumi migzar is large enough to sustain itself and to innovate without barriers. So I think that's part of it. And I think also just within the Dati Leumi community here, you have so many women who are so learned in so many different ways, in halakha and gemara. You know, you have leaders like Rabbanit Rabbi Rosenberg, who runs Migdalot, and Rabbanit Chana Henkin, and Rabbanit Malki Bina, and so many others that there's never a lack of opportunity to learn anything that you would like at any level.
Well, one of the things that we had talked about in the United States when several years ago, when I was in the role as president of the RCA, was also there was a different kind of expression, that the primary expression of women's roles in Judaism in Israel was more focused on learning, whereas in the United States it was seemed to be more focused on ritual. That they were a little bit different in both of them, and maybe functions also, like you were talking about, of the strength, the power, and so it's much more unusual, for example, to find a woman in the United States learning Daf Yomi than you would find a woman learning Daf Yomi in Israel. But I think the other expressions of women's ritual leadership is a little more unusual in Israel than you'll find in some aspects of the United States, and some of the more liberal streams of the Orthodox community.
Interesting.
It's a little different there. So what are you teaching nowadays?
So I teach a class called Hasidic Insights into Parshat HaShavua. In the past several years, I've gotten more into learning texts, Hasidic texts, and Hassidut in general. And so I enjoy it. It's a real creative process. And every week I bring different Torot of Hassidut on Parshat HaShavua, hopefully helping people to enhance their Avodat Hashem through lessons in the Parsha.
It's not the Regensburg tradition of the family or the Fishman tradition. I don't even think it's from the Tobin side.
I'll tell you this, I really think here in Israel also, again, I haven't been in the States now for 22 years. I can't speak for what's being learned there, but there is a whole slew of opportunities for learning. Hassidut is very, very popular here. Just Emunah, learning Emunah in general, Torah Rav Kook, which is connected to all of that. It's just everywhere. So I think it's the opportunity to really engage in that kind of learning. It's true. It's not necessarily from my family tradition, but that's fine. That's great.
Is it similar to what you have in the United States, what they call neo-Hasidism, where it's Dati Leumi, or in the United States, modern Orthodox with a smattering of Hassidut in it? Is that what's happening also in Israel? Where you'll stay in the Dati Leumi community, but you'll be learning Hassidut, or even the works on Tefillah from the Rav and and all of a sudden I'm forgetting his name, I apologize.
Right. Rav Zinger?
Rav Zinger.
Yes. From Dov Zinger.
Right, it's those kinds of things that you're
I guess I'm not really sure. I just feel like we're just having there's a lot of exposure to a lot of different kinds of learnings and texts, and people like Rav Dov Zinger, and one of my favorites is the Netivot Shalom by the Slonim Rebbe. It's learned across the Orthodox spectrum. This I'll say this because it's very relevant this week, as we know, is Yat Kislev, right? Yud Tet Kislev is on Shabbat, which is considered the Rosh Hashanah for Hassidut, when the Baal HaTanya was let out of prison. They have had, I only discovered this last year, but for years already, there's this huge concert, usually this week. Now, this week it's on Zoom, called Sama. Rabbi, I don't know if you've heard of it. Sama. Binyanei Ha'umah has nights for women and nights for men on the week of Yat Kislev. So it would have happened this week. Thousands of women and men coming, and it's a whole Hasidic song festival. And I went last year, and it was amazing.
I've
been
getting emails from them recently. I don't know.
Yes,
Sama. Sama, Tzadi Mem Aleph Hey, like Sama.
Yes. Sama Nafshi. It's just tremendous. You just see a whole mixing of different exposures in seminaries and yeshivot here. I know I taught in a seminary for a few years. They're teaching Hassidut in seminaries. They're teaching Emunah. They're teaching Rav Kook. And people really, in our generation today, I think people are very much thirsting for these kinds of opportunities to learn.
Does it come at the expense of other, well, it has to come at the expense of other things you would learn because there are limited amounts of time. But is the Hassidut experience taking over what had been a traditional Lithuanian approach?
I don't think so. I don't think it's taking over. I think the beauty of it is that there's now just a nice balance between a lot of different things. I always say, and I admit this in my teaching, and I loved learning at the academy and Hillel Torah, and I say I learned a lot of Chumash and a lot of Dinim and a lot of Navi. Your Navi class, by the way, in the academy was the best Navi class that I took, and I'm not just saying that; it was amazing. But talking about our relationship with Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that wasn't something. Now I'm already older, but that wasn't something that was so much a part of my Jewish education growing up. And I had an excellent Jewish education, as everyone in Chicago knows and probably shares in. But that is happening more now, and I think it's crucial. I think it's crucial if we are going. I think certainly young people today, but even older people are thirsting for big, I call it big picture Judaism, the big picture, emunah, spiritual connection to the Torah that they're learning and the mitzvahs that they're doing. So I personally feel that it's a nice balance that is emerging as the greater learning of Hassidut and other spiritual
Yeah.
texts emerge.
First of all, I have to stop for a moment because your father is watching, so I have to say hello to Jerry and Judy Fishman. Okay, but after doing that, why do you think that's happening? Though, look, what you're referring to in the United States, we refer to as God talk. That what do you think about
Yes.
God, your relationship? How come we don't talk about God?
I'll tell you. You want to know what I think? In general, I'll try to say this based on not only what I think, but what I've learned learned through my own personal learning Torah Eretz Yisrael. I think it relates to what Rav Kook talked about in his writings, and I think it's in Ma'amar Hador. Until 70, how old are we? 72, Israel. 70 some years ago, there was no state of Israel. And we were living in a reality of galut for 2,000 years. But the past 72 years, we now have a state of Israel, and it's, considered by many, certainly in the Dati Lumi community, it is the Geula, not only Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, but this is the Geula, and now we're on the way to the Geula Shlema. But so the reality is different. And now that we have a state, and now that we are building not only Judaism, but a Jewish society, an Orla Goyim with a land and nationalism, we're building a complete society. So the needs of this generation spiritually are different. In Galut, the 4 cubits of halakha is pretty much what ruled. But now we need big picture Judaism. We need to know why we're doing what we're doing, because we're building society. So I think Rav Kook would say it's a natural sort of emergence of a need for not only intellectual Judaism, but emotional Judaism, emunah, really to connect to emunah, connect to God in a very emotional and spiritual way. It's just broadened. We're living in a time of Geulah. We need Torah Geulah. And Rav Kook says that the study of emunah was for certain reasons, it was neglected in Galut, right? We didn't have the luxury of working on our own spiritual connection to God. We had to make sure that we just don't lose the halakha. But now that we're living in Israel, now in the time of Geulah, whoa, like we're just flying, and there's so much to learn.
And I guess but we also find that move of spirit towards spirituality in the Galut. So I'm not sure it's all Eretz Israel driven.
I think it is because we have Eretz Israel, because this is a time of Geulah. So of course, Jews all over the world are connecting to this. I don't mean to say that it's only happening here. I mean to say that this generation is living at a time where Medinat Yisrael is Kayam, and it's a completely different reality for Jews all around the world.
So if I were to go back to the Matan catalog of courses, would I see a big difference in courses between what's being offered now and what was offered 10 years ago?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what was being offered 10 years ago. I know they've had classes in Hassidut for several years, and they still have many courses. I mean, the other side of things is that women, and you asked about women before, women are learning Gemara and Halacha at the highest levels. You had Rabbanit Racheli Frankel on here. You said a while back, I mean, she was the head of the Hilchata program at Matan, where women are learning super high level, like the same Gemara that men would learn for the Smicha curriculum. They're learning that. So we have both things flying at the same time.
And has it had an impact on the, I guess the best way of saying it, of the observance, the religious observance of the next generation? Or is it responsive? Now, sometimes when we talk about spirituality, which is really part of the Hassidut approach, it's looking for something to try to bring people closer when they've gone away. And some of the responses of spirituality, which we see in the United States, is because people feel the Judaism of the previous generation was too dry. We're trying to make it a little stronger. In Israel, there was the phenomenon, unfortunately, of datlash or other things like this, where people have gone away, have what we'll call in English off the derech. Is that also part of the picture? Has it helped, even if it is part of the picture?
Is it part of the picture? I think I'll just say this. I know that what this generation needs is much more than, let's say, what our generation needed. I know we talk about this all the time because we see there are many kids who have who have gone off the derech, if you will. We grew up religious, and our parents raised us religious, and we did what our parents did, and that was it, and we took it on. But this generation is a different generation. I think also, just in terms of social media and technology, all of these things, there's so many things that play into this. They need, bottom line, whether it's through Hassidut or whether it's through Torah Rav Kook or whether it's through other textual texts, spiritual texts. I think that the generation today need more. They need more than we needed. They need to understand, and they want to understand why. They want to understand why I should do this. What is the big picture? Into what does it mean to be an observant Jew? We just did it because we grew up that way, but they really want to understand, and they should. This is a more sophisticated Judaism that the younger generation is thirsting for, and I think it's up to educators across the board. We sort of have to catch up. There's a generation gap, and we need to, and that's why Torah Hassidut and other things are there to help give the big picture of why it's important to keep mitzvot, why it's important to live a Torah lifestyle. Without that, without understanding the role of keeping mitzvot and living a Torah lifestyle in this world, and it's a tremendous thing to understand what our mission is as the Jewish people.
Does it translate down with that kind of work to the high schools? The high school shifting, or are we still kind of in the same approach?
Gosh, I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think, I can't answer. There's a lot of emphasis here on bagruyot, on matriculation exams, and they learn for the bagrut. But I know there's definitely efforts being made to try to speak more about big picture Judaism and why. But it's a struggle here. It's definitely a struggle here.
And one of the struggles which we've had also is, as you mentioned, between social media and things like that, where we always were taught to engage with culture. And as Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal pointed out, we were talking about higher culture, that the culture that we had was something more significant than the culture that necessarily is out there, whether it's in the social media, whether it's on television, movies, and things like that. And so there are some members of the modern Orthodox community in the United States who are rejecting that piece. There was a major shift a couple of years ago at Yeshiva University, where there were more students in Cy Sim's School of Business than in Yeshiva College. In other words, Yeshiva University had more people in a professional track than in the liberal arts track, which was the pride and joy of Yeshiva University, Torah Mada. Is that also in Israel? Are there people who are kind of moving away from what was the integration or the ability to be part of broader society? It's because they say it's just not good? Is there more of a break between, let's say, Dati Leumi and the Chiloni community in Israel than there was?
Wow, I'm not sure what to say. You're saying in terms of culture specifically?
The culture, we're staying away. Israel has an advantage. Israel has the army. So in the army, it's a mixer among Dati Leumi and also Chiloni, for good and for bad, unfortunately sometimes. But it's a mitzvah to do. But beyond that, are people who are involved in Torah learning, whether it's in the Hassidut or the more traditional areas of Torah learning within the Dati Leumi community. Are they closing themselves off more to the rest of the world, or are they open?
I think there are different elements within the Dati Leumi community. Some that are more looking to close off more, and then there are those who are less so, are closed off less so. I think, I believe there's been articles written and studies done about how the Dati Leumi community is moving. There's a section that's moving more to the right and a section that's moving more to the left. That's what I can say about that. I know, for myself, for my own family, we feel like we have a very healthy balance between, being involved in the secular or the general culture and Jewish culture. I do know, though, that, I think here we try, certainly amongst, within my community and certainly with my children there, we try to filter. We try to filter. It's important to filter out what is quality culture and what aspects of the culture are not going to enhance our neshama, not going to enhance our avodat Hashem. I think we all have to do that. That's what it means to be a Jew, is to constantly be asking and filtering and questioning, is this going to be in the service of my service of God, or is it going to take away from it?
I'm sure you saw there was a chart that someone made up, Zramim Rabbaniyim B'Tzionut Hadatit Al Hatzir Hashamrani Liberali, that the different groups, the different streams of religious Zionism, and it went from the ultra liberal to the ultra conservative, and it had everybody listed, and listed by the names. And part of the fun was that even S.D. Rosenberg is one of those rabbis listed on that.
I mean, there's something very, very wonderful about that too, that there's a lot of a lot of variety within the Dati Leumi world, as they say, la tov la ra. But people can find their place within the Dati Leumi community at a variety of points.
Do you ever get a chance to interact with the girls who come for their year in Israel nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, this year, of course, is a difficult year. I don't think people in general are having kids over, but yes, most definitely, yes. Over the past years, and certainly, children of people who live in Chicago come our way, of friends of mine that are here in Israel. Yeah, definitely. It's always a very nice thing. And my kids now, my oldest is 25, my youngest is 19. So they have had friends, over the past, let's say, 7 years, they have been the same age as kids who've come to Israel for the year. So they have friends also from America that come.
When they come, if you project back to when you came to Israel for your year,
Yeah.
how different are they?
Oh, how different are they? Oh, I thought you were going to ask how different is their experience? How different are they as kids than we were when we went to Israel?
We'll get to the experience in a minute.
Oh, okay. How different are they as kids?
As kids, do you see a difference, or they're the same as?
I'll tell you the one major thing I see. I remember when we were here, we wanted to explore. We wanted to go to different people's homes and have different cultural experiences in Israel. And we'd go to strangers, partly because there weren't that many people we knew who lived in Israel. What was it already? However many years ago I was here. And today, I think because there's so many people that these kids know, and because I think kids today have been, many, not most of them, come to Israel, have been to Israel before. 3, 4, 5 times. So it's, been there, done that. It's not as much of a sort of wow and eyes open and I want to see and I want to experience. It's, we had somebody, we actually did have somebody here recently from one of the seminaries. And, she said, I think somebody in my house asked her if she's going to stay or if she wants to come back or make Aliyah. And she said, no, one and done. It's coming and she's going back. So
it's one of the differences that I see between the year in Israel and what is today is that today it's a gap year for a lot of kids. It's the year off versus when you went, it was the year on.
Yeah. Yes, it is very, very true. And not only that, and my parents, if they are listening here, I went in 1983 to Israel. We had to do a little bit of convincing of our parents to send us. I remember the year before mine, there were 2 girls from the academy, Sherry Pomerantz, Alea Shalom, and Judy Nussbaum, and they went to Machon Gold. And so thank God for that, because that gave it legitimacy. But it was really pretty new back then to come to Israel for the year. And it was definitely a year on. It was a big deal.
In those days, you would try to get into the most challenging program you could get into. And now I often hear from students, Rabbi, I want a program where, there's no homework and where I can relax a little bit because then I'm going to start. And
right.
That was part of the differences.
Right. Yeah.
When you were and when you went to Israel, you're sharing more on Ivrit. I was speaking to somebody from Israel who was telling me how terrible the Ivrit programs are in the United States. And I told them, it's all your fault. What do you want from me? We send our kids for a year in Israel and you teach them in English.
That's right. And right, there's a lot of irony there because the seminaries and yeshivot actually are very nice, give parnasa to a lot of American olim here. And that's a very important thing. And it is a lot easier. And I think there's a lot more closeness that can be developed between the kids and the teachers here because of that familiarity, which I didn't have when I was at Machon Gold. And the Israeli teachers were it was a very different cultural, we came from different cultures. It was harder to connect in that way. So there are pros and cons to that issue. Definitely, the Hebrew is definitely a con.
It's fascinating. So Dodi, our time is almost up, believe it or not. And after all these years being there, what do you remember about Chicago that's the fondest memory?
The fondest memory, one?
I'm putting you on you can pick 2, but give me a fond memory. Something that you do that your kids can't do.
Something that my kids can't do. Oh, wow. This is really, really hard. I mean, my years growing up in Chicago were really, really wonderful. I'm just flooded now with images of, just going downtown, like Michigan, going bowling. The academy was so fun. It was really, really fantastic. But I will, if I have 1 second, I will leave you with the memory. I have a memory from your class, your Navi class at the academy, which was we were learning the story of David and Bathsheba. This was in 9th grade, and I still remember this, and I share this with people. And when David, what?
It was in 12th grade.
Oh, did we say this at 12th grade? Okay, maybe it was 12th grade. I guess so. I guess you don't teach David and Batsheva in 9th grade. Okay, so 12th grade, and you taught how when David said chatati, when David said I have sinned, that was the bravest moment of his life and the most important moment of his life. That has stayed with me all these years. So Chicago was great community, great growing up there. And now you guys, we really want you to come here. We really want you to come.
Please, God, we will all be zoche to join you and your parents and your family and all one day very soon. Dodi, I thank you so much for giving me your time. It has been a joy.
Thank you very much.
To everyone. And we look forward to having opportunities to learn Torah from you as well as to shmooze with you as well.
Bezrat Hashem. Thank you so much. Harbei Briut, a lot of good health, and everyone be well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.